The rain fell like judgment over Seoul, cold, relentless, unforgiving. On a forgotten bench in Yeongdongpo Park, a man collapsed. His tailored suit soaked through, his body motionless. His eyes closed against a world that had betrayed him one final time. Kang Min-jun, the most feared name in Korea's underworld, lay there like a discarded thing, waiting, testing, proving what he already knew, that kindness was dead, that humanity had rotted from the inside. Hundreds walked past, some laughed, others filmed. A teenager kicked his expensive shoe and kept walking. Then small footsteps splashed through the puddles. Tiny shadows stopped, and a voice, soft as a whisper, warm as summer, spoke words that would shatter everything he believed. But what did she say? And why did it make Korea's most dangerous man weep like a broken child? Please like, share and subscribe. 3 hours earlier, the penthouse had smelled of expensive whiskey and fresh betrayal. Kang Min-jun stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows of his Gangnam Tower, watching Seoul glitter beneath him like scattered diamonds. 43 floors separated him from the ordinary world. 43 floors of glass and steel and absolute isolation. Behind him, 4 men knelt on the marble floor. They had been his closest associates. Men who had eaten at his table. Men whose children had called him uncle. Men who had sworn blood oaths of loyalty. They had sold information to the Viper, his most dangerous rival, for money they didn't need. 16 years, Min-jun said quietly, not turning from the window. His voice carried no anger, no heat, just the cold emptiness of absolute disappointment. 16 years I protected your families, paid for your children's education, stood beside your hospital beds when doctors said you wouldn't survive. The rain began tapping against the glass. And for what? He finally turned. At 6'3", with shoulders that filled his perfectly tailored black Italian suit, Kang Min-jun commanded attention without effort. His jet-black hair was slicked back with military precision. His steel-gray eyes held no mercy, no warmth, no hope. The Korean dragon tattoo that began below his left ear and curved toward his collarbone seemed to move in the low light, the powerful creature winding through swirling clouds, protecting a blooming mugunghwa flower, the national symbol of Korea. Traditional brushstrokes shading faded into geometric patterns that disappeared beneath his crisp white collar. When he rolled his sleeves, a habit when conducting serious business, the full sleeves on both arms became visible. The right arm bore a Korean guardian lion emerging from flowing clouds, mountain landscapes stretching toward traditional architecture, all rendered in photorealistic detail with fine smoke shading. The left sleeve featured an ancient Korean tiger prowling through cherry blossom branches, a traditional sword, and flowing waves executed in brush art shadows. On his knuckles, simple black letters spelled eternal truths. Loyal on his right hand, honor on his left. These were the marks of a man who had built an empire on principles. Principles that everyone around him had abandoned. Speak, he commanded. The eldest of the 4, Park Sang-ho, who had been with him since the beginning, lifted his tear-streaked face. Forgive us, Chairman. We were weak. Our greed. Your greed is not the wound. Min-jun walked slowly toward them, each footstep echoing like a funeral drum. The wound is that I trusted you. Opened my home to you. I believed. He stopped. The word caught in his throat like broken glass. He had believed they were different. He had believed that somewhere, somehow, genuine loyalty still existed. Leave Seoul tonight, he said finally. If I see any of you again, there will be no conversation, no explanation, no mercy. Chief Bodyguard Han will escort you to the airport. Your families have already been relocated. The men began weeping, thanking him, praising his benevolence. Min-jun felt nothing. He had felt nothing for a very long time. After they were gone, the penthouse fell into suffocating silence. Chief Bodyguard Han Jae-won, a mountain of a man who had served Min-jun for 15 years, stood near the door, watching his boss with carefully concealed concern. He had witnessed many dark moments, the assassination attempts, the betrayals, the funerals of men who had been like brothers. But he had never seen Min-jun like this. Me. Hollowed out from the inside. Sir, Han said quietly. Should I arrange dinner? I'm going out. Han blinked. In 15 years, Kong Min-jun had never gone out without security, without planning, without purpose. Sir. Min-jun was already moving toward his private elevator. I want to walk among ordinary people tonight. I want to see. He paused, his hand hovering over the button. I want to prove something to myself. What do you wish to prove? Min-jun's steel-gray eyes met Han's. For just a moment, Han saw something beneath the cold mask. Something that looked terrifyingly like despair. That I'm right, Min-jun said. That kindness is a lie. That every human being, when given the opportunity, will choose themselves. That loyalty, compassion, sacrifice. These are fairy tales we tell children before the world teaches them the truth. Han felt his chest tighten. And if you're wrong? A ghost of something, not quite a smile but almost, flickered across Min-jun's face. I'm never wrong. The elevator doors closed. He chose Yongdongpo deliberately. It was far from Gangnam's gleaming towers. Far from the wealthy districts where his name commanded instant recognition. Here in this working-class neighborhood he was nobody. Just another exhausted businessman in a rain-soaked suit. Han followed at a distance with 2 other trusted guards. Close enough to intervene. Far enough to remain invisible. Min-jun walked slowly through the evening crowds. He watched a young woman drop her wallet. 7 people walked past before she noticed and retrieved it herself. He watched an elderly man struggle with heavy grocery bags. Dozens passed without offering help. He watched a child crying for his mother in the subway station. People actively avoided eye contact. Nobody helped. Nobody cared. Seoul was drowning in indifference. And Min-jun was collecting evidence like a prosecutor building an airtight case. By 9 o'clock, the rain had intensified. The streets had emptied. And Kong Min-jun sat down on a weathered bench in a small park that bordered a low-income housing complex. Here, he thought. This is where I'll conduct my final test. He removed his expensive watch and slipped it into his pocket. No need to invite robbery. He loosened his tie, mussed his hair, adopted the posture of a man who had worked himself to collapse. Then he closed his eyes and let his body go limp. From the shadows of a nearby building, Han watched with growing unease. What is he doing? Whispered Kim Dae-young, the youngest guard. Testing humanity, Han replied quietly. And I'm afraid humanity is about to fail. The first person passed within 3 minutes. A young man in a delivery uniform glanced at the collapsed figure, hesitated for exactly 2 seconds, then kept walking. His phone was more interesting than a potential medical emergency. The second person was a middle-aged woman with an umbrella large enough to share. She crossed to the other side of the path. The third was a group of teenagers. They stopped. They laughed. One of them, a boy with dyed blonde hair, pulled out his phone and started filming. Yo, check out this drunk businessman. Probably got fired and decided to swim in soju. Tag me when you post it. They left him there, alone, possibly dying for all they knew, and they laughed about it. Min-jun remained perfectly still, but behind his closed eyes, something was breaking. Some final fragile hope that he hadn't known he was still carrying. More people passed. A salaryman who checked his pulse, briefly, then hurried away, muttering about not wanting to get involved. A couple who argued about whether they should call someone, then decided it wasn't their responsibility. A grandmother who shook her head sadly but kept walking because her arthritis couldn't handle the cold. Nobody stayed. Nobody helped. Nobody cared enough to interrupt their own lives for a stranger who might be dying. 47 minutes passed. The rain grew colder. Min-jun's expensive suit was ruined. His body temperature was dropping. And the bitter satisfaction of being proven right provided no warmth whatsoever. I knew it, he thought. I knew there was no one left worth believing in. He prepared to end the experiment. To stand up, return to his tower, and accept that he would spend the rest of his life surrounded by employees and subordinates and people who feared him, but never, ever someone who genuinely cared. Then he heard it. Small footsteps, splashing through puddles, coming directly toward him. Amara was supposed to be home by now. Her grandmother, not by blood but by the love that matters more, would be worried. The small apartment they shared near the park was warm and dry, and there was homework waiting, and grandmother had promised to braid her hair tonight. But Amara had taken the long way home from the community center. The 5-year-old Nigerian girl was tiny for her age, with warm brown skin that glowed even in the gray evening light. Her natural curly black hair was styled into 2 neat puff buns that bounced when she walked. Her large dark brown eyes took in the world with endless curiosity and stubborn optimism. She wore a yellow dress that had been mended 3 times, once at the hem, once at the sleeve, and once near the heart-shaped pocket that had torn when she caught it on a fence. Her faded yellow backpack contained her most precious possessions: a notebook for drawing, 2 colored pencils, purple and green, her favorites, and a small family photograph that she looked at every night before sleeping. In her hands, she carried a small paper bag. Inside the bag was half a loaf of bread. It was supposed to be her dinner. Grandmother's pension was late this month, and they were stretching every one until it arrived. The bread wasn't fresh. Mrs. Park at the bakery always saved the day-old loaves for families who needed them, but it was food. It was sustenance. It was everything they had until Friday. Amara had been walking slowly, protecting the bread from the rain with her small body, when she saw him, the man on the bench. She stopped. Her heart started beating faster. In her 5 years of life, Amara had learned many things from her grandmother. She had learned to say thank you in Korean, English, and Yoruba. She had learned that everyone deserves a smile, even when they don't smile back. She had learned that sharing a little when you have nothing is worth more than sharing a lot when you have everything. But the most important thing she had learned was this: when someone needs help, you help them. Not because they deserve it, not because they can repay you, but because that is what makes us human. The man on the bench was not moving. He was getting very wet, and nobody was helping him. Amara looked around. There were people in the distance, walking fast, heads down, umbrellas raised against the rain. None of them were stopping. None of them even seemed to see the collapsed figure. She looked down at her bread. Then she looked back at the man. Her grandmother's voice echoed in her mind. Amara, kindness costs nothing, but it can be worth everything. She made her decision. Her small feet splashed through the puddles as she approached the bench. Up close, the man was very big. Bigger than anyone she knew. His clothes looked expensive, like the people in the fancy shops that she and grandmother sometimes walked past. His face was sharp and serious, even in sleep. He looked important. But right now he looked very alone. Amara set down her backpack. She unzipped it with small, careful fingers. Inside she found the extra sweater grandmother always packed. In case you get cold, my little one, and pulled it out. It was a child's sweater, purple with white flowers, much too small for a grown man. But it was dry, and dry was better than wet. She couldn't reach his shoulders. He was too tall even lying down, so she carefully placed the sweater over his heart. Then she opened her paper bag. The bread was still fresh enough, still soft enough. She tore off a piece and placed it in his hand. Here, she whispered. You need to eat. My grandmother says food makes everything better. The man didn't move. Amara's lower lip trembled. What if he was really sick? What if he needed a doctor? What if he... She pushed the scary thoughts away. It's okay, she said, more to herself than to him. I'll stay with you. I won't leave you alone. She sat down on the wet ground beside the bench, cross-legged, her yellow dress immediately soaking through. She didn't notice. She didn't care. She reached up and held his cold hand in both of her small warm ones, and she started to sing. Minjun had been pretending to be unconscious for almost an hour. He had felt the cold seep into his bones. He had heard the footsteps pass. He had listened to the laughter, the indifference, the complete absence of human compassion. But nothing had prepared him for this. The small hands wrapped around his were impossibly warm. The voice singing above him was off-key and uncertain, but it was singing a lullaby, some melody he didn't recognize, with words in a language he didn't understand. And on his chest, something small and dry was covering his heart. He didn't want to open his eyes. He was afraid of what he might feel. "It's okay, mister," the small voice said between verses. "My grandmother says rain is God crying because he's happy. Maybe he's happy you're resting." Minjun's throat tightened. "I don't have much food," the voice continued. "But you can have half. Grandmother says sharing is the best way to make new friends. Do you want to be my friend?" A tear escaped from beneath his closed lid. He couldn't remember the last time he had cried. He couldn't remember the last time anyone had offered him friendship without wanting something in return. "I'm Amara," the child said. "That means grace in my grandmother's language. She says names are important because they tell us who we're supposed to become. Grace means being kind even when it's hard." Another tear. Then another. "Are you crying, mister?" Minjun couldn't pretend anymore. He opened his eyes. The first thing he saw was her face. Round and small and impossibly young. Dark brown eyes filled with concern rather than fear. 2 puff buns of curly black hair, slightly drooping from the rain. A yellow dress that was completely soaked through. She was shivering. She was giving him her only sweater. She was sharing her only food. And she was looking at him like he was a person worth saving. "You're awake," Amara exclaimed, her face breaking into a brilliant smile. "I was worried. Are you okay? Do you need a doctor? My grandmother knows where the hospital is. I can take you there." Minjun sat up slowly. The purple sweater fell into his lap. It was barely larger than his hand. Tiny white flowers decorated the fabric. "This is yours," he said. His voice came out rougher than he intended. "You needed it more," Amara replied simply. "You were cold." He looked at the bread in his hand. It was slightly stale, day-old at best, but it had been given with everything this child had. "This is your dinner," he said. "We can share," Amara said. "That's what friends do." Something cracked inside Kong Minjun's chest. A wall he had been building for 30 years. A wall he thought was permanent. "Friends," he repeated. The word felt foreign on his tongue. "Yes." Amara nodded enthusiastically. "You needed help and I helped you. And you're not mean because you didn't yell at me. So we're friends now." Minjun looked at this child. This 5-year-old girl with nothing to her name but a wet dress and a faded backpack, and he tried to understand. "Why?" he asked. Amara tilted her head, genuinely confused. "Why what? Why did you help me?" He gestured at the empty park, at the rain, at the world that had proven his point exactly as he expected. No one else did. No one else stopped. "Why you?" Amara considered this very seriously. "Because you needed help," she said finally. "That's it. That's it." Minjun stared at her for a long moment. In 47 minutes, 43 people had walked past him. A dying man, collapsed stranger, and not one of them had stopped. But this child, this tiny girl with nothing, had given him her sweater, her food, her time, her small warm hands holding his cold ones. "'Cause you needed help. That's it." "What's your name?" he asked quietly. "Amara. It means grace." He almost smiled. "I know. You told me." "Oh," she giggled. "I forgot. What's your name?" He hesitated. Kong Minjun was not a name. It was a legend, a nightmare, a promise of consequences. But this child didn't know any of that. To her, he was just a man on a bench who needed help. "Minjun," he said finally. Just the first name. Just the man, not the monster. "Minjun," Amara repeated carefully, practicing the Korean sounds. "That's a nice name. Does it mean something?" "It means clever and handsome." Amara studied his face seriously, then nodded with the brutal honesty of a 5-year-old. "You do look smart. But you also look very sad." The observation struck deeper than any blade. "I am," he admitted. I've been sad for a long time. Why? 'Cause people keep disappointing me. Because everyone I trust betrays me. Because I built an empire and I have no one to share it with. Because I forgot what it felt like to believe in anyone. He couldn't say any of that. Because I forgot something important, he said instead. Something I think you just reminded me of. What did I remind you? Minjun looked at the bread in his hand. At the tiny sweater in his lap. At the shivering child who had given a stranger everything she had. That kindness still exists, he whispered. Even when it seems impossible. Amara beamed. It was the most radiant smile Minjun had ever seen. From the shadows, Han Jae-won watched with tears streaming down his weathered face. 15 years he had served Kong Minjun. 15 years he had watched his boss harden. Watched him build walls. Watched him lose faith in everything and everyone. And now he was watching a 5-year-old girl do what armies and rivals and enemies never could. She was breaking through. Sir, Kim whispered, should we intervene? He's been with that child for. No, Han said firmly. We stay back. We observe. We do not interfere. But, that's an order. Han watched as Minjun stood from the bench. He watched as his boss, the most feared man in Korea's underworld, carefully draped his expensive jacket around a shivering child. He watched as Amara giggled and said the jacket was like wearing a tent. He watched as Minjun laughed. Actually laughed. Han couldn't remember the last time he had heard that sound. Something is changing, he murmured to himself. Something important. He didn't know yet that this small moment would reshape everything. He didn't know that Amara's act of kindness would set in motion events that would threaten her life, test Minjun's soul, and ultimately redeem them both. But watching his boss kneel in the rain to carefully zip up a faded yellow backpack, Han Jae-won felt something he hadn't felt in years. Oh, where do you live? Minjun asked, shouldering Amara's backpack. It was almost comically small against his frame. Not far. Amara pointed enthusiastically. Building C, apartment 307. With my grandmother. She makes the best jollof rice in all of Seoul, even though she says the Korean ingredients make it taste different. Minjun frowned. Building C was part of the Yongdongpo public housing complex. Small apartments. Working-class families. The kind of place where people stretched everyone until it screamed. Your parents? He asked carefully. Amara's bright expression flickered. Just for a moment. But Minjun caught it. My mama and papa are in heaven, she said softly. They went there when I was 3. Grandmother says they're watching over me from the clouds. Minjun's chest tightened. I'm sorry. It's okay. Amara's resilience returned. I have grandmother. And now I have you. My new friend Minjun who looks smart and very sad. Despite everything, despite the rain and the cold and the weight of his broken world, Minjun felt his lips curve. Let me walk you home, he said. Your grandmother must be worried. Okay. Amara reached up and took his hand. Her small fingers wrapped around his knuckles, around the letters that spelled loyal and honor, with complete trust, no hesitation, no fear. This child, who had every reason to be cautious of strangers, gave her trust freely, because that's what grace meant. Being kind even when it's hard. They walked through the rain together. The most powerful crime lord in Korea and a 5-year-old Nigerian girl with nothing but a purple sweater and dreams. And for the first time in 30 years, Kong Minjun didn't feel alone. Grandmother Adiz was waiting at the window when they arrived. She was a small woman, barely 5 feet tall, with silver hair braided into an elaborate crown and deep brown skin weathered by years and wisdom. Her eyes were sharp despite her 73 years, and those eyes narrowed dangerously when she saw her granddaughter approaching with a large, imposing stranger. By the time they reached the door, grandmother was in the hallway, a wooden cooking spoon clutched in her hand like a weapon. Amara! She pulled the girl into a fierce embrace. Where have you been? The rain, you're soaked through. And who? Her gaze lifted to Minjun, assessing him with the penetrating look of someone who had survived too much to be intimidated. Grandmother, this is Min Jun, Amara announced happily. He was very sick on the bench and nobody was helping him, so I helped him and now we're friends. He says I reminded him that kindness exists. Grandmother's eyes widened almost imperceptibly. She recognized the suit, posture, the way this man held himself with absolute authority. But more than that, she recognized pain. She had seen it in her own eyes for many years after losing her daughter and son-in-law. She knew what grief looked like when it wore a human face. This man was drowning in it. You helped my granddaughter, Grandmother said finally. It wasn't a question. She helped me, Min Jun corrected quietly. I was testing. He stopped. How could he explain? I was having a very difficult night. Your granddaughter showed me something I had stopped believing in. Grandmother studied him for a long moment. Then, impossibly, she smiled. You look like you could use some jollof rice, she said. It's not much, but there's enough for 3. Come inside before you catch your death. Grandmother, I gave him my bread, Amara admitted. I'm sorry. I know we were saving it for. Hush, child. Grandmother stroked Amara's wet curls. You did exactly right. Kindness is never wasted, even when we have little to spare. Especially then. She turned back to Min Jun. Well, are you coming in or are you going to stand there dripping on my floor all night? Min Jun hesitated. In the shadows behind him, Han was having heart palpitations. The chairman of their organization was about to enter an unsecured building, eat food prepared by strangers, and spend time with people who had not been vetted by security. It was a nightmare. But Han didn't intervene. Because Min Jun was smiling. Actually smiling. And Han would risk anything to see that continue. The apartment was tiny. A single main room served as both living area and kitchen. A small table with 2 chairs sat near the window. A worn couch faced a television that looked 20 years old. Through a doorway, Min Jun glimpsed a bedroom with 2 beds, one adult-sized, one child-sized, separated by a colorful curtain made from traditional African fabric. Everything was immaculately clean, carefully organized, loved despite its age. On the walls hung photographs. A young woman who shared Amara's smile. A man with kind eyes. A wedding portrait. A baby announcement. The family that was no longer here. Sit, Grandmother commanded, pointing to the couch. Amara, dry clothes. Now. Yes, Grandmother. Amara disappeared behind the colorful curtain. Grandmother began moving around the small kitchen, her hands working with practiced efficiency despite her age. I don't know who you are, she said without looking at him. I don't care. But my granddaughter saw something worth helping in you. And Amara has never been wrong about people. She's a remarkable child. Yes. Grandmother paused, her hands stilling over a pot. She has lost everything. Parents, home country, the life she was supposed to have. We came to Korea because I have a distant cousin here who sponsored us. But he passed away 6 months after we arrived. She resumed cooking, her voice matter-of-fact despite the weight of her words. Amara has every reason to be bitter, to be angry, to hoard what little we have and trust no one. But she gives away her bread to strangers. A quiet laugh. Sometimes I think she is the one teaching me, not the other way around. Min Jun watched her move. This elderly woman who had survived losing her child, raising her grandchild, emigrating to a country where she didn't speak the language, and building a life from absolutely nothing. How do you do it? He asked. Do what? Keep believing. Keep hoping. After everything. Grandmother turned. Her eyes met his, and Min Jun saw decades of pain there, but also decades of strength. Because giving up would mean they won, she said simply. The circumstances, the hardships, people who said we would fail. I refused to give them that satisfaction. She smiled softly. And because I have Amara, she is my reason to wake up every morning, my reason to keep fighting, my reason to believe that tomorrow might be better than today. She ladled jollof rice into 3 mismatched bowls. Everyone needs a reason, young man. Maybe you've lost yours. Maybe that's why you were lying on that bench in the rain. Minjun couldn't respond. She had seen right through him. Amara emerged from the bedroom wearing dry pajamas covered in cartoon cats. Her puff buns had been let loose, her curly hair forming a soft halo around her head. Food time. She bounced over to the table and climbed onto her chair. Grandmother set down the bowls. The portions were small, clearly stretched to accommodate an unexpected guest, but the aroma was extraordinary. Eat, Grandmother commanded. Minjun ate. It was the best meal he'd had in years. Later, after the rice was gone and Amara was fighting sleep on the couch, Minjun knew he had to leave. He had already stayed too long. His guards were probably losing their minds. And this small, warm apartment was starting to feel dangerously comfortable. Thank you, he said to Grandmother. For the meal. For your hospitality. Thank Amara, Grandmother replied. She brought you here. He looked at the child, who was curled up like a kitten, her eyes fluttering closed against her will. Amara. Her eyes opened immediately, fighting drowsiness with sheer determination. Yes. Minjun knelt so they were at eye level. Thank you, he said seriously. For helping me. For being my friend. For reminding me of something I had forgotten. Amara yawned hugely. You're welcome. Will I see you again? The question hit him harder than expected. In his world, attachments were weaknesses. People he cared about became targets. Enemies exploited any vulnerability. This child, this innocent, precious child, would be safer if he never returned. But looking into her trusting brown eyes, Minjun found he couldn't lie. Yes, he said. I'd like that very much. Amara smiled sleepily. Good. Friends see each other again. That's the rule. That's the rule, he agreed. He stood, and Grandmother walked him to the door. She'll remember you, Grandmother said quietly. She remembers everyone who is kind to her. Not many are. Minjun paused at the threshold. I'd like to help. Financially. If you would accept. No. Grandmother's voice was firm but not unkind. We don't need charity. We need community. If you want to help, be her friend. Show her that the world has good people in it. That is worth more than any money. Minjun nodded slowly. He understood. Some things couldn't be bought. Good night, Grandmother. Good night, young man who looks very sad. She tilted her head. Perhaps you will look less sad next time. Perhaps I will. He walked down the hallway, down the stairs, into the rain that had finally begun to ease. Han materialized from the shadows, face carefully neutral despite his internal chaos. Sir. Car is nearby. Shall I? I want full background on that family, Minjun said, his voice shifting back into command mode. The grandmother Adiz. The child Amara. Their history. Their circumstances. Everything. Sir. They're not to know. I don't want to frighten them, but I want to know if they need anything. Discreetly. Han studied his boss's face. Something had changed. Something fundamental. Yes, sir. And the test. The experiment you conducted tonight. Minjun looked up at the clearing sky. A few stars were beginning to peek through the clouds. The experiment proved exactly what I expected, he said. 43 people walked past. Nobody stopped. But the girl wasn't part of the experiment. Minjun's voice softened almost imperceptibly. She was the exception. The one person who disproved everything I believed. He started walking toward the waiting car. One person, he murmured. It only takes one. Han followed, but his mind was racing. In 15 years, he had never seen Kong Minjun affected like this. By anyone. And he had a feeling this was just the beginning. The following weeks unfolded with a rhythm that surprised everyone in Minjun's inner circle. The chairman of the Kong organization, a man who controlled legitimate businesses worth billions and illegitimate operations that law enforcement pretended didn't exist, began taking walks in Yongdongpo. Always in the evening. Always near the park. Always alone except for the invisible security detail that followed at a distance. And always somehow he would accidentally, encounter a small Nigerian girl with puff buns and a yellow backpack. Min June. Amara's shriek of delight could be heard from half a block away. She would run toward him at full speed, arms extended, completely unconcerned about dignity or restraint. The first time she hugged him, Min June froze. Physical affection was not part of his world. Handshakes were strategic. Contact was calculated. Nobody touched him without purpose. But Amara wrapped her small arms around his legs with complete abandon, and something in Min June's chest cracked a little wider. By the third week, he was hugging her back. By the fourth, he was lifting her onto his shoulders so she could see like a giant. "Higher," she would command, and the most feared man in Korea would obey a 5-year-old girl without question. Han Jae-won watched these encounters with a mixture of wonder and growing concern. Wonder because he was witnessing a miracle. Concern because miracles in their world came with prices. The intelligence report landed on Min June's desk on a Tuesday morning. Hawadee's daughter and son-in-law had died in a car accident in Lagos when Amara was 3. Hawadee's had used her entire life savings to bring them both to Korea, sponsored by a distant relative. How that relative had died of cancer 6 months after their arrival. Hawadee's survived on a tiny pension from her years working as a nurse in Nigeria, a pension that barely covered rent. How they ate 1 full meal a day, stretched resources until they snapped, and still somehow maintained their dignity. Min June read the report 3 times. Then he called for Park Eugene, his most trusted lawyer. "I want to set up a trust fund," he said. "For a child. Anonymous. Untraceable back to me. Enough to cover education, housing, healthcare, everything she'll ever need." Eugene blinked. "Sir. Which child?" "Her name is Amara. She's 5 years old." Min June's steel-gray eyes held something Eugene had never seen before. "She saved my life. I intend to protect hers." "Saved your life? Sir, was there an incident we should?" "Not that kind of life." Min June turned to face the window, the Seoul skyline glittering beneath him. "The kind of life that matters." Eugene wisely didn't ask more questions. The problems began with the Viper. Jang Tae-hyun, known in underworld circles as the Viper, had been Min June's rival for over a decade. Where Min June operated with a code, no drugs, no human trafficking, no collateral damage to innocents, the Viper embraced chaos. He dealt in weapons, in flesh, in anything that generated profit regardless of suffering. Their territories had been in careful balance for years. A Cold War maintained by mutual respect for each other's destructive capabilities. But the Viper had been waiting for weakness. And now, his informants were telling him something interesting. "He goes to Yeongdongpo," one of his lieutenants reported. "Every few days. Always to the same area. He meets with someone. Who? We don't know yet. He's careful. But he's becoming predictable." The Viper leaned back in his chair, a snake's smile spreading across his face. "Then we watch. We wait. We find what he's protecting." He tapped his fingers against the desk. "And then we take it from him." Amara knew nothing of shadows and vipers. She knew that her new friend Min June was always tired but tried not to show it. She knew that his eyes crinkled when she made him laugh, even though the rest of his face stayed serious. She knew that he always brought her small gifts, books she had been wanting, new art supplies, a warm coat when the weather turned cold, and pretended they were things he found rather than things he bought specifically for her. She knew that he never talked about his family. She knew that he tensed whenever his phone rang. She knew that sometimes when he thought she wasn't looking, he watched her with an expression that looked like wonder mixed with fear. But she didn't understand why. She just knew that he was her friend. And friends took care of each other. It happened on a Thursday. Amara was walking home from the community center where she attended free after-school programs. Grandmother couldn't pick her up. Her arthritis was bad today, so Amara walked alone. She was used to walking alone. She wasn't used to the black car that slowed down beside her. "Little girl." A man leaned out the window, smiling. His smile didn't reach his eyes. "Are you lost? Do you need a ride home?" Grandmother's warnings screamed in Amara's head. Never talk to strangers. Never get in cars. If someone scares you, run. No thank you, she said politely and kept walking. The car kept pace. Are you sure? It's getting cold. We could. I said no thank you. The man's smile flickered. From across the street, a familiar voice boomed. Amara. He turned. Han Jae-won, who she knew only as the big man who follows Min-jun sometimes, was walking toward her with the focused intensity of a guided missile. The black car sped away. Little one. Han reached her, his eyes scanning the street, memorizing the vehicle, already composing the report he would give to Min-jun. Are you all right? I'm okay. Amara looked up at him with complete trust. That man was strange. His smile was wrong. Wrong. It didn't match his eyes. Min-jun's smile matches his eyes. That man's smile was like a mask. Han felt cold. This child was perceptive. More perceptive than half the trained operatives he worked with. And she had just been approached by someone. Someone who knew she mattered. I'm going to walk you home, Han said. Is that all right? Okay. Amara took his hand without hesitation. Are you Min-jun's friend? I work for him. I protect him. Then you must be very good at your job. Min-jun seems like he needs a lot of protecting. Han looked down at this small, earnest child. He does, he said quietly. More than he knows. Min-jun's reaction was explosive. Who? His voice cracked through the penthouse like thunder. Documents scattered. A lamp shattered. 2 bodyguards near the door flinched backward. We don't know yet. Han remained steady. 15 years of service had taught him how to weather these storms. The vehicle had fake plates. We're tracing it. She's 5 years old. Min-jun's hands were shaking. The knuckle tattoos, loyal honor, trembled with barely contained rage. She has nothing to do with our world. She doesn't know who I am. She doesn't know what I do. He stopped. The truth crashed over him like cold water. She's mine now, he thought. I made her mine the moment I let myself care. And now she's a target. Increase surveillance on the grandmother's apartment, he said. His voice dropping to ice. 24 hours. I want someone on Amara at all times, but invisible. She can't know. The grandmother can't know. Sir, if the Viper is behind this, then the Viper dies. Min-jun's steel-gray eyes held no mercy, no hesitation. Anyone who threatens that child dies. I don't care about treaties. I don't care about balance. I will burn down everything he's built. Han had served Kong Min-jun for 15 years. He had seen him order killings without flinching. He had seen him negotiate with presidents and generals. He had seen him stare down death itself without blinking. But he had never seen him like this. Afraid. Not for himself. For someone else. She's changed you, Han said quietly. It wasn't a question. Min-jun looked at his hands. The hands that had built an empire. The hands that had signed death warrants. The hands that a small girl had held in the rain and warmed with her innocent faith. Yes, he admitted. And I don't know if that makes me stronger or weaker. Perhaps both. Min-jun almost smiled. Perhaps. The next time he saw Amara, he brought her a gift. Not a toy. Not a book. A small silver bracelet with a single charm. A traditional Korean magungwa flower. The same flower protected by the dragon on his neck. This is pretty. Amara held it up to the light, watching it sparkle. What is it? It's a special bracelet, Min-jun said, kneeling to her level. Inside the charm, there's something that lets my friend Han know where you are. So if you ever get lost or scared, we can find you. Like a superpower. Like a superpower. Amara considered this seriously. What if bad guys try to take it? Min-jun's jaw tightened. She was thinking about the man in the car. She was thinking about danger. A 5-year-old shouldn't have to think about danger. The bad guys won't take it, he said firmly. Because if they try, I will find them. And I will make sure they never try again. Amara studied his face with her unsettling perceptiveness. You're scary sometimes, she observed. But not to me. You're only scary to bad guys, right? Right. Good. She nodded decisively. My grandmother says we need scary people on our side. She says that's why God made lions and tigers. To protect the small things. Minjun's throat tightened. Your grandmother is very wise. She knows everything. Amara held out her wrist. Help me put it on. He fastened the bracelet with gentle fingers. The silver looked almost comically delicate against the massive hands that bore loyal and honor on their knuckles. There. He leaned back. Now I'll always be able to find you. Amara threw her arms around his neck. You're the best friend ever, she declared. Minjun held her close, careful not to squeeze too tight. Over her shoulder. He saw Han watching from a distance. Saw the concern in his old friend's eyes. He knew what Han was thinking. Every moment he spent with this child, he put her in more danger. Every gift he gave her was a thread connecting her to a world of violence and betrayal. The kind thing would be to walk away. To disappear from her life. To protect her by letting her forget him. But Minjun couldn't. He had tried to be kind his entire life. Protecting his people, maintaining his code, refusing to sink to his enemy's level. But kindness without connection was empty. This child had given him something he didn't know he was missing. He would die before he let anyone take it away. The surveillance photos arrived on the Viper's desk 3 days later. Jang Taehyun spread them across his table, studying each one with the patience of a predator sizing up prey. Kong Minjun in a park. Kong Minjun lifting a small girl onto his shoulders. Kong Minjun laughing, actually laughing, at something the child said. And the most damning image of all. Kong Minjun kneeling to fasten a bracelet on a tiny wrist. His face soft with an expression the Viper had never seen. Love. The Viper smiled. Who is she? Nigerian immigrant. Refugee family. Lives in public housing with her grandmother. No connection to any organization. Just a random child he met somehow. His lieutenant shifted uncomfortably. She's 5 years old, sir. 5. The Viper tapped the photograph. And Kong Minjun, who trusts no one, who has no family, who has killed men for minor betrayals, is visiting her regularly. Bringing her gifts. Touching her with gentle hands. He leaned back. She's his weakness. His only weakness. What do you want us to do? The Viper considered. There were options. Obvious ones. Take the girl. Hurt the girl. Use her as leverage. But that was too crude. Too simple. And it would unite every organization against him. Even his allies had rules about children. Well, he needed something more elegant. Watch them, he said finally. Document everything. I want to know his patterns. His security gaps. His vulnerabilities. And then, the Viper smiled. And then we make him choose. Between his empire and his heart. 3 months had passed since the rainy night. 3 months of secret visits and growing bonds and a powerful man learning to feel again. Amara was thriving. She didn't know that her tuition at the better school had been anonymously paid. She didn't know that her grandmother's lucky win at a church raffle, resulting in grocery money that lasted months, had been carefully orchestrated. She didn't know that her apartment building had been quietly purchased by a shell corporation that suddenly fixed everything that was broken. She just knew that life felt lighter. And she knew that her friend Minjun visited often. Draw me a picture, he said one evening, sitting on the floor of her small living room. His expensive suit was getting wrinkled. He didn't care. What kind of picture? Anything you want. Amara grabbed her notebook, the same one she'd carried in her backpack the night they met, and her colored pencils. Minjun watched her work. Her small face scrunched in concentration. Her tongue poked out slightly as she drew. Do you have children? She asked suddenly. The question pierced something deep. No. Why not? He stopped. How could he explain? My life is complicated. It wouldn't be fair to bring children into it. Amara considered this. But you would be a good daddy. Minjun's vision blurred slightly. Why do you think that? Because you're patient. And you listen when I talk. And you never laugh at my questions even when they're silly. She resumed drawing. My daddy was like that. Before he went to heaven. Minjun couldn't speak. Grandmother appeared in the doorway. She had been watching. Amara, she said gently. Finish your picture. Our guest needs to leave soon. Just one more minute. Minjun met grandmother's eyes. She nodded slightly. She understood. Here. Amara thrust the notebook toward him. It's done. He looked at the picture. It was a drawing of two figures. A very tall man in a black suit. A small girl in a yellow dress. They were holding hands beneath a rainbow, and above them Amara had written in careful, uneven letters. My friend Minjun and me. Can I keep this? His voice was barely audible. Forever and ever, Amara declared. That's what friends do. They keep each other's art. Minjun carefully removed the page from the notebook. He would have it framed. He would keep it until the day he died. Thank you, he said. You're welcome. Amara hugged him one more time. See you next time, Minjun. See you next time, little one. He stood, tucking the picture inside his jacket like a precious artifact. Grandmother walked him to the door. She loves you, grandmother said quietly. I know. It's dangerous for her. What you are. Who you are. Minjun froze. Grandmother's eyes held no accusation, no fear, just understanding. I figured it out weeks ago, she said. I'm old, not stupid. The security, the gifts, the way people look at you. You're not a businessman. No, you're something else. Something powerful. Something that makes other powerful people afraid. Yes. Grandmother nodded slowly. I should tell you to stay away. To protect my granddaughter from your world. He paused. But I've watched her these past months. I've watched her bloom. She smiles more, laughs more, believes in herself more. She met his eyes. You've given her something I couldn't give her alone. Hope that the world is not all loss and struggle. Hope that good people still exist. She gave me the same thing, Minjun admitted. Grandmother smiled sadly. Then perhaps God knew what he was doing when he put you both in that park. She reached up, stretching on her toes to reach his shoulder, and patted it gently. Protect her. Not just from your enemies. From the hardness of the world. Let her stay soft for as long as possible. I will. I know. She squeezed his shoulder once more. Go now. And come back when you can. Minjun walked into the night. Behind him, in a tiny apartment filled with love, a small girl pressed her face against the window and waved until he disappeared. She didn't know that somewhere in the city, dangerous men were watching. She didn't know that her picture of two friends beneath a rainbow had just signed both their fates. She didn't know that everything was about to change. But Amara believed in happy endings. And sometimes, just sometimes, believing was enough to make them true. The attack came without warning. Minjun was in his penthouse, staring at the framed drawing of a tall man and a small girl holding hands beneath a rainbow, when his phone exploded with calls. Han's voice was ragged, broken. Sir. The grandmother. There's been an accident. Minjun's blood turned to ice. Amara. She's fine. She wasn't with her grandmother. She was at school. Tell me. Hit and run. Adiz was crossing the street to the pharmacy. Car came out of nowhere. She's alive but... Han's voice cracked. It's bad, sir. Very bad. Minjun was already moving. What hospital? Han told him. Secure the perimeter. Lock down the building. Get Amara from school and bring her somewhere safe. Do not let anyone near her without my authorization. The accident. It wasn't an accident, was it? Minjun didn't answer. He already knew. The hospital smelled like antiseptic and despair. Minjun walked through the corridors with the focused fury of a natural disaster. Nurses stepped aside. Doctors averted their eyes. Even without knowing who he was, they sensed what he was. Dangerous, determined, desperate. He found grandmother Adiz in the ICU. She looked impossibly small in the hospital bed. Tubes and wires connected her to machines that beeped with mechanical indifference. Bandages covered half her face. A ventilator breathed for her. Minjun stood in the doorway. He had seen death many times, had caused it, had witnessed it, had grown callous to its presence. But this was different. This was an innocent woman, a survivor, a grandmother who had crossed oceans to raise a child who had no one else. And she was here because of him. The driver? He asked quietly. Han appeared at his side. Gone. Professional job. We found the vehicle abandoned in an alley. Stolen. The Viper. Almost certainly. Minjun's hands curled into fists. Loyal. Honor. The words on his knuckles had never felt more ironic. Where is Amara? Safe house in Gangnam. Kim is with her. Han paused. She's asking for you. She knows something is wrong but she doesn't know what. Minjun closed his eyes. How do you tell a 5-year-old that her grandmother might die? How do you explain that it's your fault? I need to see her, he said. Sir, with respect, is that wise? If the Viper knows about the safe house. He won't. But. I said he won't. Minjun's voice could have frozen flame. Because if he moves against that child, there will be no negotiation. No warning. I will erase everything he has ever built. I will salt the earth where his empire stood. I will make his name synonymous with extinction. Han had served Kong Minjun for 15 years. He had never heard him make a threat like that. He had also never seen him more serious. I'll arrange transport, Han said quietly. Minjun nodded. But before he left, he stepped into grandmother's room. He stood beside her bed. He looked at her bruised face. And he made a promise. I'm going to fix this, he whispered. I'm going to protect Amara. I'm going to destroy the people who did this to you. Machine beep. A ventilator hissed. And when you wake up, because you will wake up, I'm going to make sure you never have to worry about anything again. He touched her hand gently. Then he turned and walked toward the war he had been avoiding for years. The safe house was a penthouse apartment that officially belonged to a shell corporation that belonged to another shell corporation that belonged to a trust based in the Cayman Islands. No one knew Minjun controlled it. No one was supposed to. But when he walked through the door, he found Amara sitting on a white couch, clutching a pillow, her eyes red from crying. Minjun. She ran to him. He caught her. He held her close. Is grandmother going to be okay? Her voice was small. Terrified. The man said she got hurt. He said I have to stay here. But I want to see her. I want to see grandmother. Minjun knelt, taking her tiny hands in his. Amara. He kept his voice gentle but firm. Your grandmother was in an accident. She's at the hospital. The doctors are taking very good care of her. But why can't I see her? Because the people who did this might try to hurt you too. Because I've put you in danger just by loving you. Because everything I touch turns to ash. Because right now, the hospital is for grown-ups, he said instead. But very soon, when grandmother is feeling better, I'll take you to see her. I promise. Amara's lower lip trembled. She's not going to die, is she? The question broke something in Minjun's chest. No, he said firmly. I won't let that happen. Promise. He shouldn't promise. He couldn't control the universe. He couldn't guarantee anything. But looking into those brown eyes, those trusting, innocent, hopeful eyes, he couldn't do anything else. I promise. Amara nodded slowly. Then she crawled into his lap and buried her face in his chest. I'm scared, she whispered. I know. He wrapped his arms around her. I'm scared too. You are. Yes. When people we love are hurt, it's normal to be scared. He held her tighter. But you know what else? What? We're going to be brave together. We're going to take care of each other. And we're going to make sure your grandmother has everything she needs to get better. Amara sniffled. Okay. Okay. They sat like that for a long time. The most powerful man in Korea's underworld. And a 5-year-old girl who trusted him completely. Outside the floor-to-ceiling windows, Seoul glittered with indifferent beauty. Somewhere in that city, the Viper was plotting his next move. But in this moment none of that mattered. Because Amara was safe. And Min-jun would burn the world to keep her that way. What Min-jun didn't know was that the Viper's plan had only just begun. What he didn't know was that grandmother's accident was just the first move in a game designed to destroy him from the inside. And what he didn't know, what he couldn't have predicted, was that the final confrontation would force him to make an impossible choice. Between his empire and his humanity. Between power and love. Between the man he had always been. And the man Amara had taught him he could become. But that choice, and everything that came after, would have to wait. Because right now, a small girl was falling asleep in his arms. And for this one moment, nothing else existed. Amara slept for 3 hours. Min-jun didn't move. His left arm went numb after the first hour. His back ached against the rigid couch frame. His phone buzzed relentlessly in his pocket. Messages from lieutenants, lawyers, informants, all demanding decisions that could reshape the underworld. He ignored every single one. Because the child in his arms was breathing softly. Her small fingers curled around the fabric of his shirt, and moving would mean waking her from the only peace she would know for a while. Han entered the room silently, pausing when he saw the scene. He had prepared a tactical briefing. Surveillance footage. A preliminary list of the Viper's known safe houses. Instead, he set a blanket over both of them and left without a word. Some moments were more important than war. When Amara finally woke, her eyes were swollen and confused. Min-jun. I'm here. I dreamed grandmother was cooking jollof rice. Her voice cracked. She was singing her church songs and dancing in the kitchen. She always dances when she cooks. She'll dance again, Min-jun said. I promise you. Amara sat up slowly, looking around the unfamiliar apartment with wide eyes. The safe house was nothing like her small home in Yeongdongpo. Everything here was white and chrome and expensive, cold in a way that had nothing to do with temperature. This place doesn't have any pictures on the walls, she observed. Min-jun looked around. She was right. No, he agreed. It doesn't. That's sad. Grandmother says a home without pictures is just a building. He almost smiled. Your grandmother is right about everything, isn't she? Almost everything. Amara tilted her head. She said Brussels sprouts taste good if you cook them right. She was wrong about that. This time Min-jun did smile. And in that small moment, in the absurdity of discussing vegetables while an underworld war loomed, he felt something he hadn't expected. Normalcy. The beautiful, mundane, irreplaceable normalcy of caring for a child. The doctor's name was Yoon Se-ri. She was 41 precise, and uncomfortable with the 4 armed men who had appeared outside her patient's ICU room without explanation. Mrs. Okonkwo sustained multiple fractures, she told Min-jun in a private consultation room. 3 broken ribs, a fractured pelvis, significant internal bruising. There was cranial swelling that we've managed to stabilize, but, Dr. Yoon hesitated. She had treated powerful men before. Politicians, executives, people who expected miracles wrapped in certainty. But this man was different. His stillness was not patience. It was restraint. The kind of restraint that suggested what lay beneath it was catastrophic. She's 73 years old, Dr. Yoon said carefully. Her body has been through tremendous stress, not just from the accident, but from years of hardship. Malnutrition, overwork, insufficient medical care. What does she need? Time, rest, the best possible care. The doctor paused. Realistically, the public hospital system can provide adequate treatment, but if you're asking what would give her the best chance, I'm asking what gives her the best chance. Private care. Specialists in orthopedic and neurological rehabilitation. A facility where she can recover without the stress of shared wards and understaffing. Arrange it. Mr. Kong, the cost of private rehabilitation for someone her age, with injuries this severe, would be. Arrange it. Dr. Yoon looked at this man, this terrifying, beautiful, broken man who was asking her to save an elderly Nigerian immigrant with the same urgency he might use to negotiate a ceasefire. May I ask, she said quietly, What your relationship to Mrs. Okonkwo is. Minjun was silent for a long time. She's family, he said finally. The word surprised him as much as it surprised her. But it was true. Somewhere between the jollof rice and the lecture about Brussels sprouts, Adiz Okonkwo had become the mother he never had. And he would spend everything he owned to bring her back. The private rehabilitation facility was in Bundang, a quiet suburb south of Seoul where wealthy Koreans recovered from surgeries and celebrities hid from cameras. Grandmother was transferred on a Thursday. She was still unconscious. Minjun visited every morning before Amara woke. He would sit beside the bed in a chair that was too small for his frame and read the Korean newspaper aloud. Not because grandmother understood Korean politics, but because Dr. Yoon said familiar voices could help patients in comas. His voice was the only familiar thing available. The one strengthened against the dollar today, he would read. His deep voice softening to something almost gentle. Exports increased by 3%. The president made a speech about economic cooperation. He paused. I know you would have opinions about all of this. You have opinions about everything. He turned a page. Amara drew you a picture yesterday. A field of flowers with you standing in the middle, dancing. She said it was your future garden. She's already picked out the seeds. He set the newspaper down. Wake up, he whispered. Please. She needs you. And I. He stopped. The machines beeped their steady, indifferent rhythm. I need you too, he finished quietly. I didn't expect that. I didn't plan for it. But you walked into my life with your cooking spoon and your honesty and your complete refusal to be impressed by anything I am. And you made me feel like. His voice broke. Like someone's son. He sat there for a long time after that. The machines breathed for grandmother. And Minjun breathed beside her, waiting for the miracle he had stopped believing in. Meanwhile, the Viper was tightening his grip. 3 of Minjun's legitimate businesses were hit with sudden regulatory investigations. Investigations that smelled of bribed officials and planted evidence. 2 of his warehouses in Incheon were raided by police who had mysteriously received anonymous tips. A shipment of electronics, legal, documented, taxed, was seized at the port on fabricated customs violations. The message was clear. It can reach you anywhere. But the Viper wasn't satisfied with business disruption. He wanted pain. The girl is in a safe house, his lieutenant reported. Gangnam District. We haven't located the exact unit, but we've narrowed it to 3 buildings. The Viper studied the surveillance photographs spread across his desk. Kang Min-jun entering a residential building. Kang Min-jun leaving the same building 12 hours later. The timestamps painted a picture of a man who was sleeping in the same location as his weakness. What about the grandmother? Moved to a private facility in Bundang. Heavy security. Kang visits daily. So he has 2 vulnerabilities now. The Viper traced his finger between the photographs. The child and the old woman. Both civilians. Both unprotected by the usual underworld rules. Sir, there are conventions about civilians. If the other organizations learn we targeted a child and an elderly woman. We didn't target anyone. The Viper's smile was surgical. An unfortunate hit-and-run accident. A random act of violence in a dangerous city. These things happen every day. And the next move. The Viper leaned forward. We don't touch the girl. Not yet. Not directly. He picked up a photograph of Amara, captured from a distance, slightly blurry, and studied it with clinical detachment. We deliver this photograph to Kang Min-jun. Just the photograph. No message. No demands. What will that accomplish? Everything. The Viper set the photograph down. He'll know we can see her. He'll know we can reach her. And he'll know that every moment he spends near her, he's painting a target on her back. He leaned back. Kang Min-jun is a strategist, rational man. When he understands the calculus, that proximity to the girl equals danger for the girl, he'll do the only logical thing. Walk away from her. Walk away from her. And when he does, when he cuts himself off from the only person who makes him human, he'll shatter. Completely. Irreversibly. The lieutenant was quiet for a moment. And if he doesn't walk away? The Viper's eyes hardened. Then we escalate. The photograph arrived in a plain white envelope, slipped under the door of Min Jun's penthouse in Gangnam, past 12 security checkpoints, past armed guards, past electronic surveillance. Someone in his own organization had delivered it. Min Jun stared at the photograph for a full minute without moving. Showed Amara walking to school. Her yellow backpack, her puff buns, her small hand gripping the strap of her bag, the silver bracelet glinting on her wrist. She was smiling. And someone had been close enough to capture every detail. Han found him 20 minutes later, standing at the window, the photograph crumpled in his fist. "Sir, there's a traitor." Min Jun's voice was terrifyingly calm. "Someone inside our organization delivered this to my private residence. This photograph was taken within the last 48 hours. Han's face drained of color. "The security footage will show exactly what they wanted us to see. Delivery person, a maintenance worker, someone invisible." Min Jun turned from the window. "They're not trying to kidnap her. Not yet. They're sending a message." "What message?" Min Jun held up the crumpled photograph. "That I can't protect her. That she's visible. That she's reachable." His jaw tightened. "That I'm the danger. Sir. He wants me to leave her. That's the play. Force me to choose between keeping her close and putting her at risk, or cutting her out of my life to keep her safe." Han was quiet. Because Min Jun was right. And because both options were devastating. "There's a third option," Han said carefully. "What?" "End the Viper. Permanently. Remove the threat entirely. A war." Min Jun's voice was flat. "A full-scale war that would consume every resource, endanger every person in our organization, draw police attention, and potentially destabilize the entire underworld ecosystem." "Yes. For one child." "For your child," Han said quietly. The words hung in the air like smoke. Min Jun looked at his old friend, this mountain of a man who had stood beside him through everything, and saw something unexpected in his eyes. Conviction. "She's not mine," Min Jun said. But the words rang hollow even to his own ears. "She is," Han replied. "In every way that matters. Is yours. And you're hers. And if protecting her means war, then we go to war." Min Jun stared at him. "Why?" he asked. "Why do you care so much about a child you barely know?" Han's stoic face cracked. "Just slightly. Just enough. Because I've served you for 15 years, he said. And in 15 years, I've watched you become less human every day. Colder, harder, more like a machine than a man." He paused. "And then a little girl with a bag of bread sat down in the rain and held your hand. And you started coming back." His voice thickened. "I didn't just lose my boss to the darkness, sir. I lost my friend. And Amara brought him back." Min Jun couldn't speak. "So yes," Han continued, "I'll go to war for her. Not because she's strategically valuable, not because she's leverage, but because she saved someone I care about." He straightened. "Give the order, sir. And I'll end this." Min Jun looked at the crumpled photograph in his hand, at the small girl with the yellow backpack and the radiant smile. He made his decision. But before the war, there was a conversation he had to have. He went to Bundang. Grandmother was awake. She had regained consciousness 2 days ago, confused, in pain but alive. Stubbornly, magnificently alive. When Min Jun entered her room, she was sitting up in bed, glaring at a bowl of hospital soup with profound personal offense. "This is not food," she declared. "This is warm disappointment in a bowl." Despite everything, Min Jun laughed. "I'll have something brought from your favorite restaurant. You'll do no such thing. I'll cook my own food as soon as these ridiculous doctors let me stand." She softened when she looked at him properly. "You look terrible." "Thank you. Sit down before you fall down." He sat. For a moment neither spoke. The private room was quiet and sunlit, filled with flowers that Min Jun had ordered daily, Nigerian lilies and Korean chrysanthemums arranged together. "The accident," grandmother said quietly. It wasn't an accident. No. Because of you. Yes. Grandmother nodded slowly. She had known. Of course she had known. Adiz Okonkwo had survived a civil war, a dictatorship, poverty, loss, and emigration. She could recognize targeted violence when it hit her. Are they coming for Amara? Minjun's hands tightened on his knees. I won't let them. That's not what I asked. He met her eyes. They want to use her against me. By threatening her, they believe they can control me. Force me to make mistakes. Surrender territory. And can they? They can try. Grandmother studied him for a long time. I should be angry with you, she said. You brought danger into our lives. Into my granddaughter's life. You have every right to be angry. I do. He paused. But anger is expensive, and I am a woman on a fixed income. Minjun blinked. That was a joke, grandmother clarified. I know. You didn't laugh. I'm working on it. Grandmother smiled, then winced as the movement pulled at her healing ribs. Listen to me carefully, she said. I am going to say something and you are going to hear it. Not as a powerful man. Not as whatever title you carry. But as a person. He nodded. Amara lost her parents. She crossed an ocean. She has lived with almost nothing her entire life. And through all of that, she has remained kind, hopeful, full of love. Grandmother's eyes glistened. She is the best thing I have ever known. The best thing this world has ever produced. I know. Then know this too, she loves you. Not because you're powerful. Not because you bring gifts. She loves you because you sit on the floor and let her draw on your expensive shoes. Because you listened to her stories about school. Because you showed up. Again and again. Because you stayed. A tear fell down Minjun's face. If you walk away from her now, to protect her, to keep her safe, whatever noble reason you construct, you will break her heart. And a broken heart at 5 years old leaves cracks that never fully heal. But if I stay, if you stay, you fight for her. You fight for us. Grandmother's voice hardened with the steel of a woman who had survived everything. And you win. Because losing is not an option when a child's future is at stake. Minjun looked at this extraordinary woman, battered, bruised, held together by sheer will, and saw more courage than he had ever possessed. I came here to tell you I was considering leaving, he admitted. Disappearing from her life. To protect her. I know. That's why I said what I said. You're telling me to stay. I'm telling you to fight. Grandmother reached out and took his hand. Her grip was surprisingly strong. You've spent your entire life building walls, young man. It's time to build a home instead. Minjun held her hand in silence. And when he left the rehabilitation center that afternoon, he was not the same man who had entered. He was something more dangerous. A man with something worth fighting for. The war began quietly. No explosions. No dramatic confrontations. Minjun was not a man who wasted energy on spectacle. First he found the traitor. It took Han 48 hours and a network of surveillance that would have impressed national intelligence agencies. The mole was a mid-level lieutenant named Baek Jin-soo, a man who had been with the organization for 6 years and had been turned by the Viper 3 months ago. Minjun didn't confront him. Instead he fed him false information. Fake safe house locations. Fabricated schedules. Phantom vulnerabilities. And then he watched as the Viper's forces moved on empty buildings and abandoned warehouses, expending resources on ghosts. Second, he systematically dismantled the Viper's financial infrastructure. Shell companies were exposed. Bank accounts were frozen through strategic tips to financial regulators. Business partners received detailed documentation of the Viper's illegal operations and quietly severed ties. Third, and most importantly, he reached out to the other organizations. Kong Minjun had spent years building relationships based on respect rather than fear. He had honored agreements. He had maintained boundaries. He had never targeted civilians, never dealt in human suffering, never broken his code. The Viper had done all of these things. And now, when Minjun sent quiet messages to the heads of 5 other organizations, not asking for help, simply informing them of what the Viper had done to an elderly woman and what he had threatened to do to a child. The response was unanimous. The Viper had crossed a line, and he would find no allies when the reckoning came. But the Viper was not a man who accepted defeat gracefully. As his empire crumbled around him, businesses shuttered, allies vanishing, resources hemorrhaging, he grew desperate. Desperate men are the most dangerous creatures on earth. "We take the girl," he told his remaining lieutenants, his calm facade finally cracking. "Tonight, before Kong can reposition his forces." "Sir, the other organizations have made it clear. The other organizations are cowards." The Viper slammed his fist on the desk. "They follow Kong because they fear him. When I have his weakness in my hands, they'll fear me more. The security around the child is imperfect. Everything is imperfect. Find the gap." His lieutenant hesitated. "She's 5 years old. I know how old she is. We don't harm children. That's the one rule. I don't intend to harm her." The Viper's voice dropped to silk. "I intend to hold her." Briefly. Long enough for Kong to understand that his empire, his code, his precious honor, none of it can protect the things he loves. He leaned forward. "And then I intend to negotiate. Territory, resources, surrender. And the girl will be returned, unharmed, assuming Kong cooperates." The lieutenant didn't believe him, but he was too afraid to say so. They came at dusk. Amara was at the safe house, drawing pictures at the dining table while Kim Dae-young stood guard in the hallway. She had adjusted to this strange new life with the resilience that only children possess. She missed her apartment. She missed her grandmother. She missed the community center and her school friends and the bakery where Mrs. Park saved day-old bread. But Min Jun visited every day. He brought her new art supplies and library books. He sat on the floor and helped her with homework, struggling adorably with the English alphabet while she giggled at his pronunciation. He told her stories about Korean dragons who protected the people they loved. She felt safe. She felt loved. She didn't know that safety was about to shatter. The first sign was a flicker in the hallway lights. Kim noticed it immediately. His hand moved to his weapon. "Stay here," he told Amara. "Don't move." "What's wrong?" "Nothing. Just stay here." He stepped into the hallway. The lights flickered again, then went out completely. In the darkness, Kim heard something he shouldn't have heard. Silence. The 2 guards at the building entrance should have been checking in every 3 minutes. Their radios were quiet. Too quiet. Kim reached for his communication device. "Base, this is Unit 7. We have a possible breach at." The impact came from behind. Vest. Professional. Silent. Kim crumpled. And in the dining room, Amara heard the sound of a body hitting the floor. "Mr. Kim." No answer. "Mr. Kim." The door opened. 3 men in black entered the room. One of them smiled. His smile didn't reach his eyes. Amara recognized that kind of smile. She had seen it before from the man in the car. "Hello, little one," the man said. "We're going to take a trip." Amara's heart hammered. She was 5 years old. She was alone. She was terrified. But grandmother's voice echoed in her mind, steady and strong and full of love. "When you're afraid, be brave anyway. Courage isn't the absence of fear. It's the decision to act despite it." Amara's hand moved slowly beneath the table. Her fingers found the silver bracelet on her wrist. The one Min Jun had given her. The one with the tracking device inside. She pressed the small charm 3 times. Min Jun had taught her that 3 presses meant emergency. 3 presses meant, "I need you." 3 presses meant, "Come find me." The man in black reached for her arm. "Don't be afraid. We just want to." "I'm not afraid of you." Amara's voice rang through the room with a ferocity that startled all 3 men. She stood on her chair, making herself as tall as possible, her small fists clenched at her sides, her dark brown eyes blazing with defiance. "My friend is coming," she said. "And when he gets here, you're going to be very, very sorry." The men exchanged glances. One of them laughed. They shouldn't have. Minjun received the alert 12 seconds after Amara pressed the charm. He was in his car 3 miles from the safe house, reviewing intelligence reports with Han. His phone screamed. He looked at the screen. 3 words. Amara. Emergency. Location. The world stopped. Then it accelerated. Drive, Minjun roared. The car surged forward, tires shrieking against wet asphalt. Han was already on the radio, barking orders in rapid Korean. All units to Gangnam Safe House 7. Code Black. The child is in danger. I repeat, the child is in danger. Minjun's phone showed Amara's location in real time. The bracelet's GPS was broadcasting from the safe house. Still there. Still inside. But for how long? 3 minutes, the driver said. Make it 2. Sir, the traffic. I said make it 2. The car wove through Seoul's evening traffic like a missile, running lights, mounting curbs, scattering pedestrians. Minjun's hands were shaking. Loyal. Honor. The words on his knuckles trembled with rage and terror. He had failed her. He had promised to protect her and he had failed. If anything happened to her, if one hair on her head was touched, he would not survive it. Not physically, not emotionally, not in any way that mattered. Amara was carried out of the building wrapped in a blanket, struggling and kicking with every ounce of her small body. Let me go. Let me go. Quiet, child. No. My friend is coming. He's going to find you. The man holding her grunted as her elbow connected with his chin. For a 5-year-old, she had remarkable aim. A black van waited in the alley behind the building. Engine running. Sliding door open. 10 steps to the van. 5. The van was right there. 3 more steps and she would be inside. 3 more steps and she would disappear into the city. 2 steps. 1. Tires screamed. Headlights blazed. A black sedan exploded into the alley at impossible speed, blocking the van's exit with the precision of a guided weapon. The doors opened before the car had fully stopped. Minjun emerged. He didn't look human. He looked like every nightmare the underworld had ever whispered about. He looked like the dragon on his neck come to life, ancient, furious, and utterly without mercy. His steel-gray eyes found Amara in the arms of the man who held her. Put her down, he said. His voice was quiet. That was the most terrifying part. It was quiet. The 3 men froze. They knew who he was. Everyone in their world knew who he was. And every instinct in their bodies screamed the same message. You will not survive this. Mr. Kong, the leader began. I said put her down. The man looked at the child in his arms, at the van behind him, at the escape that was no longer possible. He calculated his odds. They were 0. He set Amara on the ground. Ran. She ran faster than she had ever run in her life. A tiny blur of yellow pajamas and bouncing curls, and she launched herself at Minjun with the full force of her small body. He caught her. He held her so tight that she could hear his heartbeat. Fast and desperate and alive. I'm here, he breathed. I'm here, little one. I've got you. You're safe. I knew you'd come, Amara whispered into his neck, her small arms wrapped around him with ferocious strength. I pressed the bracelet 3 times. Just like you said. You were so brave. I was scared. Being scared and doing the right thing anyway. That's the bravest thing of all. He held her tighter. Over her head. His eyes met the leader of the abduction team. The look in Minjun's gray eyes contained no words. Contained something worse. Promise. Within 24 hours, the Viper's empire collapsed. Minjun didn't do it alone. The 5 organizations that had quietly aligned with him moved simultaneously, dismantling the Viper's operations across Seoul, Busan, and Incheon. Warehouses emptied. Allies defected. Financial lifelines severed. The police, guided by anonymous tips from sources they couldn't trace, arrested 17 of the Viper's key lieutenants on charges ranging from fraud to assault. The hit-and-run driver who had struck grandmother Adiz was identified, arrested, and charged within hours. The evidence trail led directly to the Viper's inner circle. And Jang Taehyun himself, the Viper, the man who had built his empire on suffering and cruelty, found himself alone in an empty penthouse, surrounded by silent phones and abandoned allies. Min Jun didn't visit him. He didn't need to. Han delivered a single item to the Viper's door. Photograph. Not of Amara. Not of grandmother. Not of any threat or warning. It was the drawing. A tall man in a black suit and a small girl in a yellow dress, holding hands beneath a rainbow. My friend Min Jun and me. Attached was a note in Min Jun's precise handwriting. You tried to use love as a weapon against me. You failed. Because love is not a weakness. It is the only strength that matters. Leave Seoul by morning. There will be no second chance. The Viper stared at the drawing for a long time. Then he packed a single bag and disappeared. He was never seen in Seoul again. The police detective assigned to the case, Inspector Cho Sungmin, was a persistent man. He had been investigating the Kong organization for 3 years, assembling fragments of evidence, building connections, looking for the one thread that would unravel the entire tapestry. The Viper's collapse had generated an avalanche of new information, testimonies, documents, digital records, and buried within that avalanche were threads that led to Kong Min Jun. Inspector Cho requested a meeting. Min Jun agreed. They met in a coffee shop in Myeongdong. Neutral territory, public space, no possible ambiguity. Mr. Kong. The inspector sat across from him, studying the man he had been chasing for years. You're surprisingly cooperative. I have nothing to hide, Min Jun said, which was technically true. His legal team had spent years ensuring that every traceable operation was clean. The Viper's organization collapsed overnight. Some might say that suggests significant involvement from a rival organization. Some might say the Viper made too many enemies. Including you. The Viper targeted innocent civilians. An elderly woman was hospitalized. A child was endangered. Min Jun's voice hardened. Any decent person would consider him an enemy after that. Inspector Cho studied him carefully. You care about these civilians. The Nigerian woman and her granddaughter. It wasn't a question. Yes. An unusual association for a man of your reputation. People are full of surprises, Inspector. Cho leaned back. He had expected a wall. Lawyers. Deflection. The cold, calculated evasion of a crime lord protecting his interests. Instead, he saw something he didn't expect. Honesty. Not about the organization. Not about business. But about the reason Min Jun had acted. He had acted to protect a child. That didn't excuse anything. But it complicated the simple narrative Cho had constructed. I'll be watching you, Mr. Kong. I would expect nothing less. They stood. Shook hands. Min Jun's knuckles, loyal honor, caught the inspector's eye. Interesting tattoos. They remind me of what matters. Cho nodded slowly. Make sure they do. He left. And Min Jun sat alone in the coffee shop, wondering, for the first time in his life, whether the empire he had built was worth preserving, or whether it was time to become something new. Grandmother came home on a Wednesday. Not to the old apartment in Yeongdongpo. To a new home. Min Jun had spent weeks preparing it. Not a mansion, not a penthouse, nothing that would overwhelm. A warm 3-bedroom apartment in a safe, quiet neighborhood with a school nearby and a market within walking distance, and a small balcony where grandmother could grow herbs. The furniture was modest but comfortable. The kitchen was large enough for proper cooking. The walls were painted in warm colors that Amara had chosen herself. Soft yellow in her bedroom, warm terracotta in grandmother's room, and sky blue in the living area. And on every wall there were pictures. Photographs of Amara's parents. Traditional Nigerian artwork. Korean calligraphy. And in the center of the living room, framed in simple wood, Amara's drawing of 2 friends beneath a rainbow. This is too much, grandmother said when she saw it, leaning on Min Jun's arm as she walked through the rooms. Her eyes were glistening. It's not enough, Min Jun replied. I told you we don't need charity. This isn't charity. This is family taking care of family. Grandmother stopped walking. She turned to face him. Family, she repeated. If you'll have me. For a long moment, Grandmother Adiz, survivor of wars and loss and oceans crossed, simply looked at the man standing before her. Then she reached up, took his face in both her hands and kissed his forehead. You foolish, stubborn, beautiful man, she said. You've been family since the night you ate my jollof rice and pretended it wasn't too spicy. It wasn't too spicy. You drank 4 glasses of water. I was thirsty. Grandmother laughed. It was the most beautiful sound Minjun had ever heard. Amara's reaction to the new apartment was significantly less restrained. My own room. My own room. She sprinted through the apartment like a small tornado, opening every closet, bouncing on every piece of furniture, pressing her face against the window to examine the view. There's a park. Grandmother, there's a park with swings. Inside voice, Amara. There's a park with swings. Amara whispered loudly. Minjun stood in the doorway, watching. Han stood behind him, also watching. You're smiling, Han observed quietly. Am I? It's a good look, sir. You should do it more often. Minjun turned to his old friend. Thank you, he said. For everything. For standing beside me through this. For believing in something I had stopped believing in. Han shook his head. Don't thank me. Thank the little girl who sat down in the rain. They both watched as Amara discovered the art supplies in her bedroom. A professional set of colored pencils, watercolors, brushes, and a stack of high-quality drawing paper. Her scream of delight was heard 3 floors down. Best day ever. Minjun laughed. It was becoming a habit. The months that followed were unlike anything Minjun had experienced. He restructured his organization from the top down. Not dismantling it, that would have created a power vacuum more dangerous than anything he controlled, but transforming it. Legitimate businesses expanded. Questionable operations were systematically phased out. Key leaders were replaced with people who shared a vision of operating within the law. It was slow. It was complicated. It was occasionally dangerous. But every night Minjun went home. Not to his sterile Gangnam penthouse. Not to the empty tower where he had once watched the city from 43 floors above. He went to a warm apartment where grandmother was cooking jollof rice, where Amara was drawing pictures, where the television played cartoons too loudly and homework covered the dining table, and someone, always, was happy to see him. He kept his own residence, of course. Appearances mattered. But he spent more evenings in that small apartment than in all his properties combined. Grandmother taught him to cook. No, no, I know, she would shout, swatting his hand with a wooden spoon. You don't stir jollof rice. You leave it alone. It's like life. Sometimes you have to stop controlling everything and let it happen. Minjun, who had controlled everything for his entire adult life, found this concept deeply challenging. But he learned. He learned to cook. He learned to braid hair, badly at first, then adequately, then with surprising skill. He learned the words to Nigerian lullabies and the Korean alphabet songs that Amara was learning at school. He learned that bedtime was not a suggestion but a sacred law, and that the consequences of violating it were severe. 5 more minutes. Amara, we said that 20 minutes ago. 5 more. Bed. Now. You're being very mean. I'm being very tired. Bed. Fine. But I want a story. You always want a story. Because you're good at stories. He would sit on the edge of her bed, this man who commanded armies and moved markets, and tell stories about dragons who were afraid of butterflies and tigers who couldn't swim and flowers that grew in impossible places. Tell me the one about the dragon and the little girl again, Amara would murmur, her eyes growing heavy. Once upon a time, there was a dragon who lived in a very tall tower. He was the most powerful dragon in all the land. But he was also the saddest, because he had forgotten how to be happy. And then what? And then a little girl came along. She wasn't afraid of the dragon, even though everyone else was. She walked right up to him and said, "You look like you need a friend." "That's right." And the dragon said, "I don't have friends." And the little girl said, "You do now." Amara smiled sleepily. "That's my favorite story." "Mine too." "Is it a true story?" Minjun tucked the blanket around her small shoulders. Yes, he whispered. It's the truest story I know. Amara's eyes closed. Her breathing softened. And Minjun sat there for a moment longer, watching this small miracle sleep, wondering how the world could produce something so purely good. The formal adoption papers took 6 months to process. Minjun's legal team, the same lawyers who had structured billion-won corporate deals, spent countless hours navigating immigration law, family court, and international regulations. Grandmother insisted on being consulted about everything. I am not signing anything I don't understand, she declared, reading every document through her reading glasses with the intensity of a Supreme Court justice. And I am not giving my granddaughter to anyone unless I am satisfied. You're not giving her to me, Minjun clarified gently. You're sharing her. I would never. I know what you would never. Grandmother removed her glasses and fixed him with a look. But I need you to know something. What? When I die, and I will die, don't look at me like that. I'm 73 with broken bones. Amara will need someone. Not someone with money. Not someone with power. Someone who will sit on the floor and draw pictures with her. Someone who will burn jollof rice and pretend it's fine. Someone who will love her without conditions. I will. I know. Grandmother signed the document. That's why I'm signing. The adoption was finalized on a bright Saturday in April. Cherry blossoms covered Seoul like pink snow. Amara wore a new dress, her first brand new dress, not second-hand, not mended, in bright yellow with white flowers. She had chosen it herself. It matches my backpack, she explained happily. At the family court, the judge, a stern woman in her 60s, reviewed the case with meticulous care. Mr. Kong, she said, adoption is not a transaction. It is a commitment. A permanent, irrevocable commitment to prioritize this child's well-being above your own. I understand. Do you? Because your background suggests. With respect, Your Honor. Minjun's voice was steady and certain. My background suggests that I know exactly what it means to grow up without a family. I know what it means to be alone. I know what it means to believe that no one cares. He looked at Amara, who was sitting in grandmother's lap, swinging her legs, completely unconcerned about legal proceedings. This child saved my life, he said. Not with weapons or strategy or power. With bread. With a purple sweater. With 2 warm hands holding mine in the rain. The judge's stern expression softened. She showed me that kindness still exists. That people can be good without wanting anything in return. That the world isn't as dark as I believed. His voice thinned. I can't promise to be perfect. But I can promise that she will never be alone. She will never be hungry. She will never doubt that she is loved. The courtroom was silent. Amara looked up from grandmother's lap. Is Minjun going to be my daddy now? She asked. The judge blinked. Grandmother smiled. Minjun knelt beside her. Only if you want me to be, he said. Amara considered this with the gravity of a 5-year-old making the most important decision of her life. Will you still tell me dragon stories? Every night. Will you still let me draw on your shoes? Only the left ones. Will grandmother still live with us? Always. Amara looked at grandmother. Grandmother nodded. Amara looked at Minjun. Okay, she said. You can be my daddy. She said it so simply, so naturally, as if it were the most obvious thing in the world. Minjun gathered her into his arms. And in a quiet courtroom in Seoul, surrounded by cherry blossoms and legal documents and the weight of 2 broken lives finally made whole, Kong Minjun cried. Not from sadness. Not from pain. From something he had forgotten existed. Oi. The judge signed the papers. Grandmother cried openly and without shame. Han Jae-won, standing in the back of the courtroom in his dark suit, wiped his eyes with a handkerchief he would later deny owning. And Amara, now Amara Kong, daughter of the most feared man in Korea, asked if they could get ice cream. They got ice cream. 3 scoops each. Even grandmother. 1 year later, Seoul had changed. Or perhaps Minjun's perception of it had changed. The city was still vast and cold and indifferent in many ways. But it also contained pockets of extraordinary warmth. In the bakery where Mrs. Park still saved day-old bread for families in need, in the community center where children from a dozen countries played together, in the small park in Yeongdongpo where a bench still stood beside a path. Minjun visited that bench sometimes. He would sit there in the evening, wearing his tailored suit, watching the world pass by, and remembering the night that everything changed. The night a 5-year-old girl sat down in the rain and held his hand. His organization was barely recognizable. 90% of operations were now fully legitimate. The remaining 10% were being systematically converted. His reputation had shifted. Still powerful, still respected, but now with a different dimension. The man who had once been feared for his ruthlessness was now known for something else. A code of absolute protection for the innocent. Any organization that targeted civilians, women, children, the elderly, found themselves facing the combined force of every alliance Minjun had built. It became the one unbreakable rule of the Korean underworld, enforced not by treaties but by the certain knowledge that Kang Minjun would destroy anyone who violated it. They called it the Amara Rule, though they never said so to his face. Inspector Cho Sung-min continued his investigation. He was thorough and honest, and over the months he uncovered enough to understand the truth. Kang Minjun was not a simple criminal. He was something far more complex. A man who had built an empire on the ruins of a broken childhood, who had maintained a code when codes were inconvenient, who had protected people when protection was unprofitable. Didn't excuse everything, but it complicated the prosecution significantly. The inspector and Minjun developed an unusual relationship. Not friendship, but mutual respect. They met occasionally for coffee, each understanding that they were adversaries who happened to share certain values. "You're cleaning house," Cho observed one afternoon. "I'm evolving. Some would say it's too late. Some would be right." Minjun sipped his coffee. "But too late is better than never." Cho studied him. "The girl changed you. The girl reminded me of who I was before the world convinced me to become someone else." Cho nodded slowly. "My daughter is the same age," he said. 6 years old. Afraid of spiders but picks up stray cats. Amara adopted a pigeon last week. She named it General Feathers. Despite himself, Inspector Cho laughed. It was the beginning of something neither of them expected. Understanding. Grandmother's garden flourished. The small balcony had been converted into a green paradise. Tomatoes, peppers, herbs, and flowers crammed into every available pot and planter. Grandmother tended it daily with the devotion of someone who understood that growing things was itself an act of faith. "Jollof rice with homegrown tomatoes," she declared proudly. "Even Korea cannot ruin this." "Korea has been very good to us, grandmother," Amara pointed out, perched on a kitchen stool, her legs swinging. "Korea has weather that confuses my tomatoes. But yes," grandmother smiled. "Korea has been good." Minjun arrived for dinner carrying takeout from Amara's favorite restaurant, a Korean fried chicken place that grandmother considered an abomination but Amara loved with religious fervor. "You brought the crispy one," Amara shrieked, launching herself at him. "I brought the crispy one," he confirmed, catching her with one arm while balancing the food with the other. "Grandmother, Minjun brought the crispy chicken." "I can see that." Grandmother eyed the bags with theatrical disapproval. "We're having jollof rice. We can have both," Amara declared with the unshakable logic of a 6-year-old. They had both. Over dinner, Amara described her school day in exhaustive detail. Who said what, which teacher was nice, which student shared their snack, which insect she had observed during recess. "It was a beetle, and it was beautiful," she insisted. "It was green and shiny like a little jewel. I named it Professor Greenback." "Did you set it free?" Minjun asked. "Of course. Grandmother says all living things deserve freedom." "Grandmother is right." "Grandmother is always right," grandmother confirmed from across the table. Minjun looked at them, this tiny magnificent family that he had stumbled into on the worst night of his life, and felt the thing he had once believed was dead. Gratitude. For cold rain on a park bench. For a child who stopped. For bread that was freely given. 4 hands that held his when no one else would. For a grandmother who loved without limits and fought without surrender. For a second chance he didn't deserve but would spend the rest of his life earning. Later that night, after the chicken was gone and the jollof rice was finished and grandmother was dozing in front of a Korean drama, Amara crawled into Minjun's lap. She was getting bigger. Soon she would be too big for this. But not yet. "Tell me a story," she murmured. "Which one?" "The true one." He knew which one she meant. "Once upon a time," he began, "there was a man who forgot how to believe in people. He had been hurt many times by people he trusted. He had been betrayed by people he loved. And slowly, piece by piece, his heart turned to stone." Amara nestled closer. One rainy night, he sat on a bench and pretended to be asleep. He wanted to prove that no one in the world would help a stranger. And for a long time he was right. Many people walked by. No one stopped. "But then someone did," Amara whispered. "But then someone did. A little girl with a yellow backpack and a bag of bread. She had almost nothing in the world. But she stopped. She sat down in the rain. She held his hand. She shared her food." "Why?" Minjun smiled. "Because he needed help. That's it." Amara was quiet for a moment. "And the stone heart cracked," Minjun said softly. "Piece by piece, day by day, until there was nothing left but the real heart underneath. The one that had been hiding all along." "And what happened to the man?" Minjun held his daughter close. "He found his family," he whispered. "And he was never alone again." Amara smiled. Her eyes closed. Her breathing deepened. And in the warm glow of a living room filled with photographs and drawings and evidence of love, Kong Minjun held his daughter and listened to the sound of grandmother's soft snoring and the distant hum of Seoul beyond the windows. He thought about the bench in the park. About the rain. About 43 people who walked past. About the 44th who didn't. He thought about how close he had come to believing the worst about humanity. How close he had come to becoming stone all the way through. And he thought about how one small act of kindness, a piece of bread, a purple sweater, 2 warm hands in the rain, had been enough to change everything. Not because the world was suddenly perfect. Not because people were suddenly good. But because one person, one tiny, brave, impossibly generous person, had chosen kindness when it cost her everything. And that was enough. One person. One act. One moment of grace. That was all it took. Minjun pressed his lips to his daughter's forehead. "Thank you," he whispered. "For the bread. For the sweater. For the hands that held mine. For teaching me that kindness is not weakness. For showing me that love is not a fairy tale. For reminding me that even in the darkest night, someone will stop. Someone will always stop." Amara stirred slightly in her sleep, her small fingers curling around the fabric of his shirt. Outside, the city glittered. Somewhere, someone was sitting alone on a bench. Somewhere, someone was walking past. But somewhere else, in a warm apartment filled with jollof rice and crayon drawings and the quiet breathing of people who loved each other, a man who had lost faith in humanity held the reason he found it again. And he smiled. Not the cold smile of a man with power. Not the calculated smile of a man with strategy. The simple, genuine, unguarded smile of a father holding his child. The world was not perfect. Never would be. But it was good. Because somewhere in the rain, a little girl with nothing had stopped for a stranger who had everything except the one thing that mattered. And she had given it to him freely. Without hesitation. Without conditions. Without expecting anything in return. Grace. That was her name. And it was her gift. And it was enough. And with that, our story comes to an end. If this story touched your heart, we'd love to hear from you. Tell us in the comments. What was the most emotional moment for you? Was it the little loaf of bread? The rainy park bench? Grandmother Adi's wisdom? Or the moment Amara finally called Minjun Daddy? And wherever you're watching from around the world, let us know your country and city. It's always amazing to see how stories like these connect people across different cultures and continents. If this story reminded you that even the smallest act of kindness can change someone's life forever, don't keep it to yourself. Share this video with someone who needs a little hope today. And if you're new to the channel and you enjoy emotional stories filled with unforgettable characters, powerful life lessons, and heartwarming endings, be sure to subscribe, turn on the notification bell, and join our growing family so you never miss our next story. Thank you so much for spending your time with us. Until our next story, take care of yourself, keep believing in kindness, and remember, sometimes the smallest hands leave the biggest mark on someone's heart. God bless you, and we'll see you in the next video.